I did.
Yeah.
So Elon Musk was on, what was his name? Leo Friedman's podcast. And I'd probably heard the name somewhere, but just have way too many things to watch and not enough time. And basically, it was Leo picking Elon Musk's brain about like the Neuralink project and what it's going to do, what the whole AI thing is going to happen, all of that stuff. And I think you need a kitty.
I do.
She's sitting on the ground like, hello, love me. And so it was interesting. I think Elon Musk is a bit optimistic about how well things are going to work and interface in people's brains. Like, to him, which makes sense, the hard part is like the programming and getting sort of the communication happening between whatever computer network and the brain. But to me, like, the huger issue is that putting things in brains tends to not go well. Like, there's a reason why it's not done in humans unless there's not any other possible option, like for people with really bad seizures or Tourette's or things. And in animal models, like rats, I think it's like macaques are used in vision research. You train the animal very well on whatever task it is that they're going to be doing. Do the surgery where you implant the brain interface. Go as long as you can, and then at some point, the animal dies. It's good. Like,
you're saying the medical's hard.
yes.
Isn't there curing and some other sort of commonplace implants that?
So I think the cochlear implant that you're talking about, like, I don't think it goes into the brain. I think it just sort of gets fed into the nerve, which kind of pokes out from the brain's casing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I would think even harder than the medical is probably like figuring out how to interface it to the brain in a useful way.
Yeah. Well, and so in the interview, because beyond just like brief summaries of Neuralink, like I haven't really looked into it because like that's a ways off. Yeah. So he was talking about doing just single neuron recording, which is done in animals and a little bit in humans. Like if you have their brain open for brain surgery or whatever, like sometimes some research is done then. But recording at the single neuron level and doing that for whole networks of neurons, like, maybe it sounds cool for investors, but that just, no, we are a long way away from being able to do that in people and have them be okay. Especially for something where it's like sort of a future tech, get people to interface with like the next stage of our evolution or whatever you want to call it. No, like, I'm trying to remember when we talk about like different recording techniques for brain stuff. Because he was talking, and it was an interesting analogy about FMRI, which is functional magnetic resonance imaging stuff. I don't know if you're familiar, but for posterity, yes, that was, ooh, yes. So I will get to that in a second. And that, for the not other people listening, is Musk advocating for a cure for autism, which is, yeah, it's kind of eugenist dog whistle a bit. So there's different ways we can see what the brain is doing. And fMRI is one of them. And so MRI, you basically go into the scanner thing, and it's looking at the hydrogen in water responds to the magnetic field. And so the banging and the pulsing and all of that stuff when you're in there, it's the magnets turning on and off to see the hydrogen in the water, which for functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, you're basically looking at blood flow in the brain. So for these experiments, typically you go in and have a 30 to 60 minute anatomical scan where you just lay there and they get a nice high resolution image of your brain. Whoop, I keep hitting the mic. And then after that, you do the experiment. And in the experiment, basically you're doing whatever task, like say a memory task where you see a bunch of stuff, and depending on the thing, like you might see the word and then have the processing, like the MRI, turn on for a couple seconds and look at the changes in blood flow. At the end, do a recall task or a recognition task where, like, yes, I saw this word before, no, I didn't, blah, blah, blah. And after the presentation of the word, the MRI turns on again really quick to see what the blood flow is doing. And so basically, fMRI is built on this assumption that changes in blood flow are related to changes in brain activity. So if you see an increase in blood flow, presumably that means that you have an increase in processing in whatever area. If there's a decrease in blood flow, there's a decrease in processing. And there's absolutely been critiques about that. And there's also been critiques about how this is done by necessity. So there is a brain, a nice high-resolution brain that was taken way back in the early days of fMRI research. And this is the standard brain. And so every other person that goes through these experiments, their brain is stretched or squished or mapped onto that ideal brain or that standard brain. And so Musk made an analogy of doing fMRI research and trying to figure out what's going on in the brain as being similar to going up to a factory with a stethoscope and trying to figure out what's going on inside. Which, okay, kinda. That seems like a better analogy to EEG to me, which is electroencephalograph stuff, the nets of little electric picker-uppers electrodes that measure changes in electrical activity. That is tied to processing and other stuff, and really, if we're being honest, is good at picking up changes in cortical activity, electrical activity, but can't really go deeper inside. And so sitting there with the stethoscope outside a factory, that seems similar to EEG to me. But yes, so coming to that in a sec. So we've got things like EEG, we've got MEG, which is similar to EEG but uses like magnets instead of electrodes. Hi, Discord person. There's fMRI. You can do stuff with CT scans, and there's single cell recording or like small population neuron recordings. And typically that's only done in humans, as I was saying, if you already have their brain open for brain surgery in some way. People are typically pretty happy to consent to be in experiments like, hey, before you put them under, like, would you be willing to do some task to figure some stuff out with the brain while we're in there? And it's typically pretty harmless. So some of it kind of ties in if like they were doing a surgery to remove like a tumor or something, and the tumor is near like the parietal cortex or other motor involved areas or language areas, they will stimulate the brain to see like, okay, stimulate here, what happens? Does something want to move? Do you feel something? Is there a memory brought to mind? Like, is this activating something? And if it is, they know that they're in the functional area of brain and not the tumor. And so, I mean, we sort of have done some single cell stuff, but it's been largely in the medical setting, and we're already doing something else. So let's leave the brain be otherwise.